Hey everybody, so I got a comment on my super ego video that I wanted to address directly rather than responding in the comments. I think it was a very good question, but let me read off the comment to you. I'll go ahead and put it up here in the corner as well. If everyone can just go ahead and on a load board and dispatch themselves out of their trucks easy peasy, then everyone will be doing so. Even the ones who have their own trucks paid off and have their own authority don't see it easy. Brokers don't have to tell you how much they are getting paid, and neither does the shipper. Go straight to the shipper, ask them for loads. Any dealer will sell you a truck, bad or good credit. I get that these super company are clowns, but why the hell is 3,000 drivers clowning over there? They can't read a contract, just seems absurd. I am almost sure no company shows you 100% of the rates confirmations. They are all playing these clown games. Dispatching yourself isn't easy, and there's plenty of brokers just like this super company who aren't paying anything, making up claims that never happened, like TQL, and then saying you owe them for delivering the loads. I hate all these dishonest shysters, thieves, con men, and scammers. FMCSA isn't going to do bleep except for find the drivers. Yeah, let's get into that. So first things first, let's start with the easy one. Actually, the brokers are required by law to share the rates with you. It's CFR 371.3 Section C. Each party to a broker transaction has the right to review the record of the transaction required to be kept by these rules. And of course, that information that's required to be kept by the broker is the name and address of the consignee, the name, address, and registration number of the originating motor carrier, the bill of lading or freight bill number, the amount of compensation, and that's the important one, the amount of compensation received by the broker for the brokerage service performed, and the name of the payer. A description of any non-brokerage service performed in connection with each shipment or other activity, the amount of compensation received for the service and the name of the payer, and the amount of any freight charges collected by the broker and the date of the payment to the carrier. So the brokers actually have to maintain all of this information, how much they've been paid by the shipper, and obviously how much they're keeping, because as the carrier, if you're requesting this information and you are a party to the broker transaction as the carrier, you can by law request this information from the broker, and they are by law required to provide it to you, in which case you will know exactly how much they're keeping. Now the problem is that most brokers completely ignore this law. They will put terminology in their contracts that say that you waive your right to this information, etc., etc. It has been determined by the courts that they don't have the actual right to put in that waiver into the contracts. That particular clause is void. But the problem is the FMCSA doesn't enforce this rule. They don't give a damn about the carriers. They don't give a damn about the drivers. They don't give a damn about anybody. They're basically, although it's law, it's not an enforced law. So the brokers are getting away with this, and that's one of the big things that's going on right now in this whole broker transparency debate that's going on in the industry. We all know that the brokers are screwing us. We all know that they're hiding the numbers, and we all know that there's law in place that requires them to share the numbers, but they're not doing it. So, you know, we're kind of in between a rock and a hard place. There's laws on the books that are just simply not being enforced. So that answers that part of the question. The actual comment about brokers not sharing their numbers is Yeah, they're not sharing their numbers, but they are required to share their numbers if we ask. But most of them aren't. When it comes to Super Ego and their ability to attract 3,000 drivers, well, they recruit hardcore. They are very, very aggressive when it comes to recruiting. They have people, I guess, probably in Serbia or wherever it is that they're based, that make phone calls, that text people. They use all kinds of tactics to recruit new drivers. Of course, you've got the big logos on the sides of all their trucks to, be your own boss, etc., etc. So they're very aggressive with finding new suckers. I would prefer to think of them as suckers, not as drivers. But, I was a sucker too, so I don't I don't disparage the suckers. I just, because at the end of the day, they're falling victim to the same scam as the other 3,000 drivers that go to work at Super Ego. But basically, they recruit very, very aggressively, and they're very effective at it. And on top of that, that 12% that they tell you that you're going to get, it's kind of misleading, because you assume that 12% is 12% of the rate confirmation, and it's 12% of what Super Ego is getting. The text in their advertisements is a little bit misleading in that respect, and they were actually sued for that not too long ago. But they won, because the text in their advertisement says it's 12% of the offer, not 12% of the rate confirmation. So it doesn't matter what the rate confirmation says. They're not going to tell you that. They don't have to tell you that, because you are a subcontractor. You're not technically party to the brokered transaction. So they don't have to share that information with you, and they don't, and they take full advantage of that and are probably skimming quite a fair amount off the loads. As an example, while I was driving with Super Ego, the industry national, or the national average spot rate was $2.14, as I recall. $2.14 a mile was the national average. I was getting well below $1.75 on most of my loads, and that didn't even factor in the deadhead. The loads that I was getting were extremely high deadhead. So yeah, that was the rates that I was being offered, about $1.75 or less in many cases. And if Super Ego is doing anything right, they're negotiating probably national average or better, which means they're skimming 45 cents a mile off the load before they ever even offer it to you. I don't know exactly what the math is, but let's just call that roughly 30% of the load. They're skimming right off the top before they ever even offer it to you, and then they take an additional 12% on top of that. So yeah, how do they manage to attract 3,000 suckers? Well, hardcore recruiting. That 12%, although they're misleading you, and they're making you think it's 12% of what they're getting, it's not 12% what they're getting. It sounds really good, because that's an extremely competitive number when you compare it to places like Prime and places, the other major carriers that pay a percentage of load. They generally will take 15% to 25%, depending on the company. So 12% is an extremely attractive number when you don't realize that it's 12% of a number that is completely fictitious and is probably 40% lower than what Super Ego is actually getting for the load. And of course, part of their recruiting is they have referral fees that they pay out. They have a very generous referral program, and they push you as a driver to start a YouTube channel, to get the information out there, to use your referral code. And so they're very aggressive with the recruiting. And so a lot of the YouTubers that you see out here, especially if you see any YouTubers that are mentioning their referral code, run, because that guy is basically just a shill. He is possibly making what he says he's making, but most likely he's doing that by running extremely hard and running well beyond his hours of service limitations. Because keep in mind, that's what I was talking about in my video. They will tell you, and I actually was using, I was going off of memory when I recorded that video. I later looked at the actual conversation I had with my dispatcher about that. I had said in the video it was 90% of the drivers. He told me it was actually closer to 99%. I also said in the video, he told me that I could get an extra $1,000 a week if I would run illegal. He actually told me $2,000 a week, and I do have I still have the chats from that conversation saved in my phone. So if it ever came up, I've got receipts. Yeah, so that's how they're able to lure in and maintain 3,000 suckers. It's very, very high turnover. While I was there, you could see guys coming in, throwing their, dropping their keys off, turning in their trucks. Obviously, they have a constant flow of drivers coming in, failing, and leaving. And then they just rely on their recruiting department to fill those slots. So yeah, I think that's how they maintain 3,000 drivers, is they make promises. They make it sound very appealing. They're able to recruit tons of drivers, and keep in mind they only require 4 months of experience. So a lot of drivers will be coming straight out of CDL school, maybe have just a little bit of experience under their belts, working for a mega carrier, working for somebody as a company driver, and they want to get their feet wet as a lease purchase, and they're not experienced enough to know that the super ego deal is a bad deal. I knew better. I should have known better. I figured, what's the worst that can happen is that I won't make any money, and that's exactly what happened. I threw in because I wanted a lease purchase program that was as much like operating as a independent carrier as I could find, that they withheld the least amount of money from what they offered me. Now, I foolishly believed that I would be able to manage that, and as long as I was getting offered rates that were at least reasonable and that I could make money off of, that I could probably manage to find enough loads to make a profit. Unfortunately, I was wrong. I was not ready. I leapt into the deep end too soon. I should have taken a more cautious approach, and I didn't. And as a result, I failed. And I think most of the drivers that go to Super Ego will fail. Some drivers will succeed, but it's probably, in most cases, the ones that succeed at Super Ego are the ones that are just running their asses off regardless of what the actual law would allow them to do. They're editing their logs. They're running 5,000-6,000 miles a week. And when you do that, yeah, you can probably make money, and you can probably make enough money that you would say that you're successful at Super Ego. So, but 5,000 to 6,000 miles a week is a ridiculous amount of miles, when the typical driver that's out running the company driver that's running as hard as he possibly can is probably making between 3,000 and 4,000 miles a week. That's, if you do the math, if you've got a 70-mile-an-hour truck and you run 10 hours a day, you know, and 70 miles is not the average speed. Your average speed is going to be 60 miles an hour, and let's say you are able to run that 10 hours a day. Obviously you might get a little bit more than that, but the math works out. 60 miles an hour, 10 hours a day is 600 miles a day. 6 days a week, 3,600 miles. You might get 4,200 miles if you're able to manage your schedule. You're not going to run 4,200 miles, because after the 6th day you're going to run out of your 70-hour cycle, and you're going to have to take a reset. So figure 3,500 miles is a good week for most drivers out here. And if super ego drivers are running 4 or 5, 6,000 miles in a week, yeah, they're going to be able to put in enough miles to make enough money to say that they're successful, but it's completely illegal. And they're going to get burned on that eventually, or burned out, and that may happen to a lot of drivers as well. Either you fail because you just tried to run it straight and couldn't make a buck because they skimmed too much, or you burn out completely because you're just running crazy amounts of hours and crazy amounts of miles every week. And you know, for some of these young bucks, okay, they can probably do that for a little while. Older guys like me, I need my sleep. I couldn't do that. I would never be able to do that, even if I was willing to do it illegally. So yeah, that hopefully answers your questions as to how they're able to have 3,000 suckers working there, and how the other megas are able to do it. It's just a numbers game. You know, they can recruit heavily, and they can make a lot of people. They can sucker a lot of people into these scams. So it's not that they're doing something right; it's that they're doing something sneaky enough, and they're good at it. And that's how they're able to bring in enough people to keep a company that size going. Anyways, James, thanks for your question. Hopefully you will subscribe to the channel. I can tell that you're not yet subscribed, but hopefully you'll subscribe and ask some more really good questions. I really appreciate it. For everybody else, if you've got questions that you want to ask, please post them in the comments. I will do my best to either answer in the comments, or maybe if it's a big enough question, I can make a video just like this one. Also, if you find value in the content on my channel, if you're enjoying it, please make sure to subscribe and hit the like button, and of course comment. It really does help out the channel. Thanks.